Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, Lachlan. Study access plans and supporting students with a disability, how to improve the experience for students and academics. I'm here with Sandy and from Assistive Technology, and hopefully by the end we'll answer some of the questions that you might have, but then there'll be time for questions at the end. Next slide. Thanks, Sandy. All right, so just a bit of a recap. I wanted to explain, many of you might know, but just in case you don't, who the Accessibility Inclusion team actually support. So we look after students with a whole range of disabilities and conditions, and some of those can be ongoing chronic conditions and some can be temporary. So the temporary types of conditions would be, somebody who's fractured their arm and might need some support for exams, for instance, and they only need help for a period of time. And the whole premise of our service is to facilitate reasonable adjustments to help students to study on the same aspect and ability as those who don't have a disability or a condition. So to give even the playing field for students. Next slide. Thanks, Sandy. Just also wanted to take this opportunity to say that we also support carers, and we have carer support plans for students who study at the university. Now, I am a parent and I do have children, and I'm not dismissing the complications of being a parent and studying, but you don't get a carer support plan just because you have children. They actually have to have meet that definition that's listed on the slide, and have to have a significant caring responsibility, and that might be for a child with a disability or an elderly parent, and those sorts of things might impact on your attendance, the students' attendance to sessions, and it also might impact on their flexibility for completing assessments because they might have some additional responsibilities there. So I think at the moment we've got about 65 students who have carer support plans. They'll look exactly the same as a study access plan, similar template, but so when they come across your desk, and I think, like I said, there's about 65 of them at the moment, so not a huge number, but that does make a huge difference to students who are carers to have that some adjustments to assist them. Thanks, Sandy. Reasonable adjustments. So why do we have study access plans and why do we provide adjustments? It's not a nice thing to do. It is a nice thing, but we're not just doing that because that's a good reason. We're actually doing it because it's part of the Disability Standards for Education and the disability discrimination legislation. So, reasonable adjustments are a requirement to ensure that the student with a disability has equal standing. And it's very important that academics realise that it's not to make it easier for a student with a disability to lower the standards of what's to be required, but it's just some adjustments that are put in place to give an even playing field for those students. And it's important to remember that it's, we're being judged around that. So if we don't provide reasonable adjustments, there's only a few reasons for which we couldn't provide reasonable adjustments. One of those criteria is unjustifiable hardship. So if the cost of an adjustment is too expensive, say for a community agency to provide, they might be able to not provide that on the grounds of unjustifiable hardship. And we're a multi-million-dollar organisation, so it would be very hard for us to say we couldn't afford to do something. So we would have to unpack that if anybody felt that that was the case, but I think that that would be very unlikely. And also we can't provide reasonable adjustments that have a negative impact on other students. So we can't do one thing for one student that's actually going to disadvantage others, and that's a reason why we might be able to decline reasonable adjustments. Thanks, Sandy. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but the Accord is a very important document with the Commonwealth Government, and the whole premise around the Accord is to increase representation of equity groups, and that includes students with a disability. So the government wants to have a greater representation of equity students in higher education. So what will that actually mean for us? That will mean that there will be more students with a disability at our institution in the future if those goals of the Accord are actually obtained by the government. And the Accord's quite exciting because it does demonstrate that what I've learned from the funding process through students with a disability is that there's some recognition that there needs to be more done for students with a disability, and the government feels that if they fund us a little bit differently to how they have in the past, if we do better planning and universal design for learning in the way that we teach students, then we should have to do less retrofitting of materials and costs at the end for students to change for the exceptions. So, and they're changing their funding model to make that more attractive to universities, which is a real positive. But the one positive thing is there's going to be more students with a disability, and we need to be thinking about that in the way that we support them. Thanks, Sandy. I just wanted to share a big shout out to academics or anybody listening to this presentation today, just to give a little bit of information about how students hear about our service. You can see from the pie chart that they hear about us in lots of different ways, so we need to be getting our information out there. But as academics, you're often got the students in front of you and get to know them, and they might share things with you. And, you know, you're sending them to all the support services in the university, so we thank you very much for that. I've had academics say to me, look, I'm not sure, I don't know if they've got a diagnosis, and I don't want to be off-putting to a student telling them to come to accessibility and inclusion support and they might not have a disability. And my answer to that is to say to the academics to make announcements in your I2 sites, or to sort of normalise it in conversations to say that there is a whole range of support services available to all students. Mention academic skills, mention our service, mention counselling if students are struggling, they're homesick, or they've got issues happening in their life. And I think if you sell the support services as a whole, then you don't have to feel too worried about the concern if a student hasn't disclosed and you're not aware that they do have a disability or a health condition, how to get through that. So thanks, Sandy. Students working with our service from 2018 to 2024. So you can see that over the number of years, the head count is trending in a downwards way, but the proportion of students registered with accessibility and inclusion support as a percentage of head count is increasing. So if you feel like you've got more study access plans in your subjects, these statistics say that that is inaccurate, and that's not just with us, that's across the entire sector. And of course, as you would know as academics, there's lots of students that might be registered with us, but there are other students who choose not to register, or but still are having some difficulties and having some impact of conditions on the way that they study. And the stats are probably 1 in every 5 students that is sitting in front of you would fit into that category, and only a certain percentage of them register with us, but those are the percentages of those who have. Thanks, Sandy. Many academics would have seen our study access plan template, and I've just sort of taken a screenshot of a front sheet. So basically what the plan details is the start and finish date of the plan, which varies depending on some students may have studied before and are very clear on what they need for adjustments, and some students will come and they're not sure what they need, so we might review their plan sooner. So that's why the date and length of a plan can vary. Students it's up to them as to how they detail their condition. Some students actually want their diagnosis listed on the plan, while for other students, they're just detailing the impacts of their condition on study, which is a description, which is really the most important thing about really what does their condition and how it impacts on their study. And then there's a list of adjustments that go underneath that. Thanks, Sandy. So roles and responsibilities, I get asked this quite a bit. This is actually included on the SAP template, but I just wanted to go through it with you. So as an academic, it's important that you handle the study access plan as a confidential document, respecting the sensitive nature of what's in there. Really, the only people who should see it are the people who need to do something around those adjustments, and we should be limiting that information going out to everybody within the university. It's just who needs to know for the purposes of the adjustments. And I think the other responsibility that's important for academics to remember is that if you're implementing exams or quizzes outside of the main exam session, it's your responsibility to administer the alternate exam arrangements during that time. So the main exams that are timetabled through the exams for the end of session exams, if there are alternate exam arrangements that are required for a student, we enter those in and then they populate into the timetable. And that's how main exams staff then do timetable for the students. But if you're running them within the school, then it's responsibility of subject coordinators and the school to organise those. The responsibility of the student are to send the SAP to you as a subject coordinator, and if there's, just to let you know that we send a bit of a campaign in week 5 of every session to all students, just to remind them to pass the plan on to subject coordinators so they're aware of what students need. If there are the odd chance where a student needs support to pass on the plan, we can do that, but we do see it as an important part of teaching them the skills to advocate for their adjustments as they would need to in the workplace. So that's an important requirement. And it is the student's responsibility to let us know before the plan ends to actually renew the plan, but we do also manage that because we know students don't always get organised, so we do sort of email out to students letting them know that your plan's about to expire, book in or touch base to make a time to get that updated. Thanks, Sandy. The role of our team in study access plans is, like I said, to inform the exams office of those alternate exam arrangements, which we do, and also to cover the costs of any reasonable adjustments. So if there's any equipment or software or loans of pieces that are required during a student's journey, we can actually purchase and loan students that, and then they provide that back to us to reallocate to another student at the end of their course or the end of the time that they need that. So and there's a sort of a claiming process that we can obtain some of those costs that we spend on those sorts of things back from the Commonwealth Government. And it's also the responsibility of our staff to make adjustments within the delegation. There is the assessment flexibility procedure, which does give some of our staff delegation without consultation to make certain adjustments that have been agreed to as minor adjustments, and we can do that without consultation. But if there's something in a study access plan a student's treating practitioners requested or the students requested and we're not sure if it could be accommodated, then we would need to liaise with subject coordinators or a head of school to determine whether that could be put in a plan or not, because we need to ensure that a student can still meet the inherent requirements of the course. Thanks, Sandy. So I'll hand over to you, Sandy, now to talk about assistive technology. And just before I hand off to Sandy, we've got about 2,400 students at the moment who have an active study access plan. And I would say probably, not all of those students who have a study access plan require assistive technology. Possibly 1 in 3, maybe, or 1 in 4 of the students that we have on our books might have some connection to assistive technology. So I'll hand over to Sandy to explain how that works.
Thanks, Sam. So just a little bit about this. There's 2 of us assistive technology advisors, myself and Wendy Barker. So students must be registered first to be referred for assistive technology, and they've already got their draft study access plan. And during those initial appointments with their advisors, if it's felt that they may get help with assistive technology, that's when they're referred to Wendy and I. So Sam mentioned we support students with equipment or software. Those sort of things can be quite expensive, like specialised desks or text-to-speech software. So we're able to loan it to the students while they're studying at Charles Sturt and got an active study access plan. Assistive technology in our section, we also make learning materials accessible to students, and that could be like providing textbooks or converting other learning material. It could be audio transcription, which could be in a Word format. It could be Auslan interpreters. It could be live captioning in an online meeting, or it could be even printing. Probably the primary in the alternate format area would be providing prescribed textbooks for students. We start about 6 weeks before session starts, and we rely on the textbook database for information because subject sites aren't live and subject outlines may be still in draft or haven't been created yet. So if the database isn't updated, you may be contacted by our team for some textbook information. So I'm hoping this screen is, everybody knows about it. If we don't have the right information in this textbook database, it's going to cause delays for students, and particularly if they're already in session, so they might have had a study access plan during session, we're then getting them textbooks. If this isn't updated, there is quite a delay. We can't request books from publishers without this vital information. So, because publishers need to know that we've got access to a book's been purchased either by the student or by the university. In an ideal world, if the textbook database was really accurate and kept up to date all the time, this means even if there's no prescribed textbooks, that it's got a confirmed, or the details about confirmed textbooks with the correct information. It just means there's no delays in our jobs for processing, and we can deliver it to students in a timely manner. Now, since Brightspace was introduced last year, the team decided that the Polaris team decided for us to provide alternate format materials, that it would be in subject sites. This is what it will look like in your subject. So that we try and put the accessibility inclusion support topic towards the end of all the subject contents. Of course, if there's interactive and there's other topics being added, it might end up being sort of in the middle. We ask, please don't remove this or hide this topic, because once there's some alternate format material to a student, we email them to say they can find it in their subject site. So we do get quite a few inquiries. I can't find my topic. I can't find my textbook. Each students are notified by an email when it is ready, and each resource has release conditions attached to a student. So this is to comply with copyright and also privacy. Within that accessibility and inclusion topic, there is the copyright, and if you're not sure why it's there, or the second page does talk about the disclaimer, and it's got our contact details. If anybody wishes more information on this, if we get any inquiries, we do have a document that explains why we're delivering alternate formats and why it's in the subject site now. Previous to Brightspace, we used to have in Interact 2, we used to create individual organisation sites for each student. That's how it was delivered. It's just all in Brightspace now. So as I mentioned, the first page will be that welcome to accessibility inclusion, and that's about the copyright disclaimer and our contacts. After that, any subsequent pages, and quite often, because prescribed textbooks is the primary work, and this is what it would look like. So this is from a nursing subject. Those links actually go to DOMS, where we archive all our alternate format material. So the copyright and the student privacy is controlled by groups. So we create a main category called accessibility inclusion support. And then we would create individual groups, just one per student, called transcript and their last name. As an example, this screenshot is actually what a student would see. And I say in this subject, Law 217, there was probably about 5 students, but each individual student will only see their own group. Us as staff will see everybody's, but only the students can see their own, so we're protecting privacy. What we are finding, though, is the accessibility and inclusion topics, that whole content topic area is being copied. This is thought in 2025-30. The whole site, all its content is being copied either back to the master site or to the next session site. So what's happening is all that alternative format material and all those groups for students are being copied to the next one. So we're now breaching copyright, and also it's a bit of breaching privacy as well. So please be aware, if you are copying material or back to the master site, that you don't copy the accessibility and inclusion groups or the actual content. So what can you do to support students? Well, there's lots of little small wins that could be achieved, which fall below the level of having specialist assistance, and they do have a positive impact on students. So improving accessibility actually improves experience for all students. So even though we've got students who've got a study access plan, we're doing all this alternate format. If you can, as Sam had mentioned, implement universal design for learning, it actually helps everybody. So there is a large body of research and practice behind accessibility. Universal design refers to design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible, without the need for adaptation or specialised design. So in education, this means delivering course content, teaching materials and delivery methods to be accessible to and usable by students across a broad diversity of ranges. So ensuring that your teaching practices maximise your learning for the widest possible array of characteristics present within the student cohort enables an inclusive environment to be created. So inclusive education facilitates access, participation and success of students. This approach acknowledges that students with a disability or other needs may learn differently, but they're not less academically capable. So just a few examples for universal design for learning is if you had a weekly announcement outlined what in the schedule, just so students know what the expectations are for that week. Delivering content in multiple formats. So you might have video, podcasts that are synchronous. You might have a transcript there. Having alternative assessment submissions. So they could be written or oral, and also allowing that automatic 7-day extension. So there, as I said, there's just some small things that you can do that can have a big impact on all stakeholders. So these small wins or changes, they need to be low cost, they need to be easily resourced and supported. They have to be achievable by all academics, and we don't need you to use special software or training. So what we've narrowed it down to is the top 5 quick wins for accessibility. So what do we mean by quick wins? So academic initiated changes that have an impact on all learners, especially those with accessibility needs. So the following tips are achievable and accessible for academics to utilise without specialised support. So this is the top 5. This is the ones we see probably that need more addressing, that we see commonly, that if universal design was in the subject sites, that they're small changes that can make a big impact. So for example, if you're using audio video content, I'd say some of the things that we have seen is a microphone that was under the lapel of a jacket and was just a muffled voice. Not wearing a headset or the sound isn't clear. If you're only using the laptop microphone, sometimes, particularly on PCs, the microphone's not as good as, say, on a Mac. And maybe some poor recording environments or noisy backgrounds. They're things that lead to issues with audio video. So when we're doing alternate format, when we're creating it, we have human editors to do word transcripts, and probably the worst, due to some of those reasons above I've just mentioned, is if they can't understand a word, they put inaudible. And I think probably the worst case scenario we've seen, we had 92 inaudible words in a 1-hour lecture, and you can imagine how distracting that would be to read it. Oops. So some of the wins. So turn on your automatic speech recognition, and it's called ASR for short, in your lectures and your online meetings. So have it on live. We've noticed Zoom in recordings, probably all subjects now, it automatically produces a transcript, but only after the recording's finished. But it's a good idea to have it turned on in a live online meeting as well. Make sure the Zoom recordings are in the cloud. That makes it easier for us if we have to do audio transcription, but also be aware that the ones that are in the cloud, they expire after 12 months. So if you want to use those recordings again, whether it's a lecture or an online meeting, they need to be sort of captured somewhere. So probably moving to Panopto or YouTube, and probably Panopto is would be the university's preferred method. And it's also very easy. If you put a Zoom recording in Panopto, there's actually a button you can press in Panopto and it will turn on audio, auto speech recognition. If we do need to prepare human audio transcripts, make sure the recordings are easy to find. So if a recording's buried in a forum or an announcement, it just makes it a little bit longer for our staff to be able to find it. So generally in Brightspace, that should be the Communications tab and the Zoom iCloud, and then the on that tab. We have seen huge improvements in Zoom transcripts this year, particularly around the punctuation. So we're looking at moving away from Word documents in audio transcript and hoping there's some way that we can edit the Zoom transcripts in the future. So then they will be accurate transcripts for all students because they'll be back in with the recording. Quick win number 2 is creating a PDF of subject content. So you may be unaware, but when students try to create, there's a button there to download a page, but they can only do one page at a time. Whereas us as staff, we can get the whole topic at once. If you're preparing content, say in a Word document to start with, have a think about turning that into a PDF as an additional resource. We used to see it a lot in Interact 2, probably less likely now in Brightspace, but we do know a lot of students like to study offline. They've been working all day and they don't want to look at a screen again, so they might want to print it out, or they might actually just want to read it offline. Quick win number 3 is what we've seen. We have seen colours that could be the whole text box is the background is multiple colours with the text over it. It was very, very hard to read. And for universal design in learning, if you just use those same colours, if you want that impact of colour, you could probably put it around the border and just have the text in a white box or just a plain coloured box, and it still has the same impact. So colour does, we're saying don't remove colour. Colour is important to provide interest as a visual tool, to identify an item, and also for decorative purposes. Except colour should not be only colours should not be only the means of conveying material like an action or a prompt. So if the contrast between the text and the background is not correct, the colour can lose its appeal and make it difficult for students to read, like the example I gave about the multicoloured background text boxes. So using combinations of high contrast that can be read by students who are also colourblind as well. Quick win number 4, just accessible images. Images and diagrams, again, they're useful to enhance the content, not just for text alone. So, but students who cannot distinguish images, depending on the content being transcribed into an alternate format. So the example I've got there was an image of the word university. If you zoom in on your screen, it's just going to become pixelated and you can't read it. Whereas if the word university as text, doesn't matter how zoomed in it is, it would always be, always could be read. When you're using alternate text, there's an alternate for any images. They could be simple, they could be complex, or they could be decorative. And it's always good to add that for, particularly for screen readers, they like alternative text. Be very careful with animations as well. They should be user controlled. So if there is an animation, a user can turn it off, or they should be very short. So also just instructions, they should be in text. Don't rely on a student being able to identify an instruction by shape or size, screen location, orientation or colour. And the last one, quick win number 5, pretty much every program, particularly Microsoft, Google, Adobe products these days have accessibility checkers already built into their programs. So if you're not sure how to make something, principle of universal design, you can actually run these accessibility checkers and they will actually tell you things to look at. And often they will tell you how to fix it as well. And even within, in Brightspace, CSU has purchased the Anthology Ally. We had it in Interact 2, and now it's been integrated into Brightspace. And Ally actually works on an organisation, a subject or academic or student levels. So it will actually tell you what needs changing. You may have noticed Ally has a little indicator in your subject site. So green's very good, down to amber, and then red's not so good, and there could be some accessibility issues. So in our experience, just collaborating, it's easier for student success. Start with those little small things, such as some of those 5 that I've mentioned. Identify the gaps and focus on something which is going to have a big impact. For example, reducing the time it takes for us to do audio transcripts, because if we're doing audio transcript for a student, we have to wait for that recording to be published. We then send it to an editor. We do ask for online meetings. We ask for it to be returned within 24 hours. It needs checking, and then we put it up in the subject site and let the student know that it's there. So the students are delayed. Don't be afraid to reach out to us across different divisions or teams if it's warranted. And remember, this benefits all students. So solving a problem for any student is good, but improving it for all is powerful. So how can your collaboration have a life of its own for a time in the future when it can't rely on you to directly drive? So will there be a lasting resource? And I think for a good example of that, if you're using pre-recorded lectures for future sessions, ensure that there's a really good transcript that's going along with that pre-recorded lecture. And don't wait for policy to catch up. Your collaboration may be the stimulus for policy, procedure, or technology that's needed, and show the need by highlighting the gaps. And then we'll move over to questions now.
Thanks, Sandy.